Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. Tonight we continue our dive into Stones to Abigail. When we last left our friend James, he had been beaten up at school. He had been suspended for 2 days. The other boy got suspended for 10 days. Abby had been getting yelled at by her boyfriend, and James got off the bus and ran over. And all Abby can do, because Abby, by the way, is not emotionally able to do anything. As soon as Abby starts getting yelled at, she fucking ducks her head and she can't do shit. The women in this book, I feel, are not emotionally equipped to deal with their own surroundings. So you have James to do that for her. And what a surprise that Abby is crying. So, without further ado, you can light them up, by the way. Excuse me. It's fucking Canada. Chapter 3. Briefly after I fell asleep that night, I had a dream about Abby. It was the first dream I had experienced in some time. I'm not normally the type of person to be deeply impacted by dreams, as more often than not, I can control them. I can recognize the fact that I'm in a dream and twist things around so that whatever is making me afraid becomes afraid of me. This tactic, however, could not possibly work in this soon-to-be nightmare, as there was no living monster waiting around the corner. There was no emotion in this machine that was about to reveal itself to me. I could only watch without a physical form. I was just a helpless spectator in my own mind. The dream began without any sound, only a deep hum accompanying what appeared to be Abby laughing in a field of what looked like gray grass from afar. As my view of her revealed more detail, I began to realize what I thought was grass was actually long, slender claws. Experiencing a more alarmed spectrum of emotions, the audible hum cut out and was replaced by Abby's screams. The sounds echoed, bouncing off the walls of my mind, splitting me in two, engulfing the core of my being. She was not forming any words in her screams, and I began to understand why the more I analyzed every detail. I shifted my perspective to a new angle. I was now above her, looking down, and could see the claws were pulling her into the ground. She showed no resistance to being dragged into the ground. She didn't even cry for help. She would only scream in pain as she slowly sank beneath the surface. I began to distinctly hear blades and gears violently turning just beneath her. It's difficult to explain, but in her eyes, I could see she didn't want to be saved, as she genuinely felt she had earned the suffering she was enduring. She believed she deserved to be ground up until there was nothing left. Once she was pulled completely under, I was finally given a physical form in the dream. Dropping from above, I landed on the soil she disappeared in. I immediately dropped to my knees and began with my bare hands to get Abby. I was only inches deep before the ground ripped open, forcing me to jump back. A deep canyon began to form central to where I had begun digging. The splitting and groaning quickly gained momentum. Ripping and screeching sounds erupted all around me as the earth divided before me at a now crippling rate. A hellish sight consumed my eyes as I looked down upon the collapsing landmass below. Powerful machines wielding massive blades swung violently, scraping dirt and rock, with a sound so tremendous I could only faintly hear the screams of countless desperate humans below. I quickly realized the terrified voices beyond the ripping blades were no illusion. Thousands of lives were being devoured in piles, no person among them begging for life. Rather, like Abby, they screamed only from pain, delivered not just by the roaring blades and gears, but their very existence itself. Suffering and consciousness had become one and the same. I then woke up to my room filled with sunlight, but it could not change the darkness my dream had left me with. I felt something inside me change, almost as if I had seen something I was never meant to, and now had to find a way to lose the thick cloud freshly looming over my head. It is as I said briefly before. I feel like a visitor here, like I'm in this world, but not a part of it like everyone else. I study people and situations to find out how they work, and sometimes my dreams fill in the emotions I thought I missed while I was awake. Not having to go to school that day due to my suspension, I decided to write a letter to Abby. It read, "When I look in your eyes, I at times feel a level of sadness I've never felt, as if we, despite barely knowing each other, have been apart for too long. When I talk to you, it is like I'm listening to a voice I've ached for, yet I haven't heard in a lifetime. Every other experience I have with you seems familiar, but at the same time, it hurts. Like you would feel if you begged for something and only received it when you had already given up hope. These feelings are also strange and evolving at a rate that scares me, as they are for someone I am only just now truly getting to know. Even my brief presence in your life, I've picked up on so much suffering and almost feel powerless to create any change. There are so many wounds, so many scars, so much I only know enough about to fear. I'm trying to understand. Abby, you have more pain in your life than I can imagine. I hear it in your voice. I see it in your eyes and in the way you move. I just want to see you smile without there being an ocean of tears behind your eyes. I want to hear everything you have to say. I want to find a way to heal the damage done until you can forget it ever existed." I sent the letter to her email address. Moments later, the phone rang. Answering the phone, I heard Abby's voice on the end.
"Hey, can you meet me at the Quick Stop?"
she asked. I responded.
"Did you see my email?"
She replied.
"Nope. Why didn't you just call?"
I said.
"It would have been really hard to say over the phone. I had to find the words."
She replied.
"Okay, I'll look and then I'll head over."
I then confirmed.
"Sure. See you there."
Shortly after, I got dressed and skated over to meet her. I arrived quickly, thanks to what seemed to be a record speed for me. However, once I arrived, I found myself waiting for someone who had no intention of meeting me. I had just made myself look like a huge jerk to her. I attempted to call her from the nearby payphone, and she didn't answer. As I skated home, in my mind, I went through the letter I wrote over and over. I began to blame myself, concluding based on her absence that I must have dug too deep too fast. I scared her away because I reacted to the emotions I had experienced in that dream before actually considering the human beings on the other side of the letter. I felt like I was just about to finally connect with someone, only to ruin everything at the last minute.
That was a very short chapter.
Chapter 4. My suspension had been lifted, and I had just arrived back at Lakewood High. Approaching my history class, I could hear people snickering as they watched me walk by. Someone screamed,
"Wuss! Learn how to fight!"
behind me, but I just kept walking. As I sat down in class, Mr. Hanson walked up to me. He placed his hand on my shoulder and spoke under his breath so others wouldn't hear.
"Don't worry about the work you missed, okay, James?"
I looked up at him, and he gave me a slight smile. I suppose it's because he felt bad I was beaten up shortly after trying to get Jason to leave the class alone. It was a lucky break, too, considering Mr. Hanson's class was one of the few I didn't stop by to see what work I would miss before beginning my suspension. I approached the art trailer feeling panicked over what to expect. I hated that I said anything to Abby, and I overstepped my bounds and acted like I knew her when I was only going off my own dream-influenced emotional intuition. I felt a conflicted hatred towards myself for jeopardizing a relationship with someone that was so important to me. If she did give up on me, I could only blame myself. Opening the door, I could see Abby wasn't inside. Instead, there were just pieces of the bear. There were just pieces of my bear sewn to pieces of her bear sitting on my desk. Maybe I was reading too far into what it meant. I could really only hope that there was something left to us that I could sew back together. Walking closer, I could see something sticking out just beneath the bear. It was a note that read,
"James, meet me behind the church when you get this."
Immediately, I thought of the church neighboring Lakewood High. I stuffed my backpack inside the desk and quickly made my way off campus to meet Abby. As I approached the church, there was a strong, forceful wind blowing behind me that made it feel as if I was being pushed to her by nature itself. I felt like a fool for thinking that I am far too unimportant for any significant force to consciously influence my life. I walked around the church only to hear Abby say, loudly,
"James!"
I turned to see her standing under an overhang that reached out from the church. I walked over to her and began to apologize for the letter, but she cut me off, saying,
"Why did you write that letter to me?"
I responded,
"I wanted to separate myself from everyone else in your eyes. I wanted you to know I was trying to understand all of..."
She interrupted.
"How messed up do you think I am, James? How screwed up do you think my life is exactly? Because if you had any social skills, you might know that saying to someone what you did is, 'I'm not damaged goods, James. I'm not broken.'"
Her voice was giving out as she began tearing up.
I'm sorry,
she said, helplessly watching tears fall down her face.
"I was wrong, but I'm still here, and I will be here as long as you let me,"
I said. She wiped her tears and struggled to speak.
"The reason you saw what you did in my eyes, my voice..."
She continued to struggle on as she cried.
"You saw the bruises from my ex, but you wanted to know everything."
She paused to wipe her tears again. I listened carefully as she continued to speak.
"James, I haven't been just beaten up 1 or 2 times,"
Abby said as she looked at me, as if every word was agonizing for her to say. With tear-soaked eyes, she continued.
"I've been violated beyond that, James. By people who called me their friend. By people I trusted. They took advantage of me. That killed so much of who I am. Who I was."
Her face was consumed with stress. Her body shook, but she managed to continue.
"My mother abandoned me and left me with my father, who doesn't even care if I'm alive."
Before she could finish, I wrapped my arms around her. She dug her fingers into my back as she pulled me closer and cried into my chest. As we held each other, I said,
"You're never damaged, only changed. Any part of you that you think died is just hidden. wanting to come out when it's safe.
Abby squeezed me even tighter. I continued.
Every time I see you, you become more beautiful to me than before.
She gripped me more tightly than anyone ever had. She was finally hearing everything I wanted someone to say to her, and I was saying everything I wanted Abby to hear. That is, most everything. This book is fucking with me. Well, friends, this has been Doctorpiece Theater, and my name is Dr. Dennis Business. And as always, my friends,